Welcome everyone to Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and today we are continuing our deep dive series into the Bermuda Triangle. We're on part 34 today. We're reading from Gian J. Quasar's book, The Bermuda Triangle II, from 2017. We are starting and finishing chapter 6, titled Electronic Fog, an answer or a symptom. So I'm glad to have you all here. Let's just get this background music going. Let's get the Illuminati up. I've been looking forward to this chapter. So, if you haven't already, please like this video. If you are a new viewer, please consider subscribing. I am doing 3 weekly shows here on this channel. Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. So with that being said, let's get started. So again, we have the photographs from the book prepped to show up on the screen here in place of the Illuminati slideshow when we get to those pages. Today there's one map, and it's near the end of today's chapter, but we'll pull it up. It'll be nice and large, displayed here on the side here. But yeah, let's get going. Chapter 6, Electronic Fog. The answer or a symptom. Over the last half of the 20th century and into the 21st century, with better documentation of each disappearance in the Bermuda Triangle and the details surrounding their losses, it is already apparent that many prosaic explanations cannot even approach what is required to explain the most perplexing cases. Piracy most certainly has taken many boats, especially the power boats, but not those at a harbor's entrance or those rounding a peninsula. Also, piracy does not take the individual and leave the valuable and useful boat behind. Air piracy is now vogue, but the circumstances are fairly easy to determine. The aircraft is stolen from an airfield, used to pick up and ferry the drugs, and then many times the plane ends up ditched at Rum Cay in the Bahamas. In the shallow waters nearby, compatriots are waiting in their boat for the pilot to swim over. Together, they then make their escape. The pirates return the airplane to the tarmac at the home airfield. Evidence that an owner's plane was temporarily stolen is seen only on the odometer, which has logged a 10-hour flight. The usual round-trip time to some small airfield in the Bahamas or Cuba, or for the faster jets into South America. Blood found in empty boats, especially those found in the shallows, may have less otherworldly motive than alien abduction. Or may have a less otherworldly motive than alien abduction. Barracudas use the shallow bottom to leap out and assail a boater, biting their neck or chest, as one kayaker found out in October 2010 when a barracuda leapt out of the water and bit her with such force it punctured one of her lungs before it dived back into the water. And that's wild. Fortunately, she was in the tandem with another kayaker who called medevac. This cause must be borne in mind, especially for the many small inshore derelict vessels that have been found in this century and found, moreover, after April 10th, 2010, when the BP oil spill commenced in the Gulf, resulting in much marine life migrating closer to shore to find its prey. I'll take a brief pause here. Hey Zenray, good to see you. Yeah, Tuesdays on Coral Castle show was giving Zenray some problems here. I'm glad that cleared up. YouTube, you better be sending this out to more of my subscribers than just 10 of them. There's no explanation for that. Or I have yet to hear one. It's not the content. I max out all the tags. So it's just the usual. Just the usual from YouTube here. I'm looking up a word here because I'm not sure if it's pronunciation. And you know, for all the usefulness that we have with the internet, like this, we have words in these books that these internet browsers can't even define what the words are. So that's how limited we are here with web browser search results. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and try to pronounce this word. It's spelled M-I-N-I-C-A-N-E-S. I doubt it's pronounced minicanes. Minicanes? And we can't look up the definition of it because it's just not showing it to us, so that's that. Let's continue. Minicanes. CATS, clear air turbulence, suicide, pilot error, have all no doubt played their hand considering how deep is the list of missing vessels and aircraft. But none of these can account for the lack of debris, especially from aircraft such as those two that vanished on approach to Harry S. Truman Airport. Nor can they explain the terse reports of electronic malfunction, haywire compasses, and repeated reports of, quote, electronic fog, end quote, hitherto confined between pilots, but a phenomenon which is now finding allusion in official accident reports based on the last words of pilots. The curious fact underscores the existence of certain phenomena reported by pilots and shipmasters in that types of phenomena seem limited to certain areas, and embellishment has no borders. In the case of electronic fog, for instance, it is reported only in the area of the strict triangle. UFOs, on the other hand, are seen throughout the world, but grouped in certain areas of the triangle. Sections of the triangle also seem prone to specific types of mysteries. Deserted vessels in the Bahamas and off Florida are ship-shape, whereas in the heart of the triangle or eastward of the windwards and leewards, approaching the strict triangle, the derelicts are a shambles. This may suggest the area is prone to waterspouts. Waterspouts are suggested in such cases as the Sophia, Poker Face, and perhaps even the offshore pergola. Though Tom Olszewski, vanishing after coming topside on his tropic bird in response to a radar sighting, adds a chilling touch. His vessel was also undisturbed. A waterspout might even explain the what's left. There's another vessel. The cyclone picking it up and twirling it around being the cause of Lisk's transected spine. But of all the theories, none is so quintessentially associated with the Bermuda Triangle as, quote, electronic fog, end quote. Although he is not the first pilot to report the, quote, electronic fog, end quote, Bruce Gernon has had the most celebrated encounter with it, and is the pilot who has coined the term. Well, that's good to know. Let's take note of his name here. Bruce Gernon, Gernon. Along with his father and friend Chuck Lafayette, he was en route to Miami Beach on December 4th, 1970, in his Beechcraft Bonanza. Just after passing Andros Island, they noticed a huge lenticular cloud ahead. And lenticular, it's like a lens, shaped. And just to verify that, let me do another search here. Yeah, anything with the shape of a double convex lens. It's like two. Like if you take two lenses. It soon morphed with incredible speed, this lenticular cloud, extending upward and then encircling them. So it went up and then went out. To draw an analogy, like hugging arms reaching out to grasp them. Now almost all around them, this fomenting storm cloud sparkled with bursts of light, and in parentheses, though these were not lightning bolts, end parentheses. Unable to get above it, Gernon found himself essentially locked in the inside circle of a deadly storm donut. Seeing the space was still open in the cloud before it completely interlocked into an encircling ring, he sped for the area, increasing his RPMs into the danger zone. Upon entering this narrow area, it constricted around him, the walls of the cloud now swirling counterclockwise until the tunnel constricted from 200 feet diameter to touching his wingtips. So it really did wrap like that. That's wild. Inside, the swirling tunnel distance also seemed to change. As he entered the tunnel, he estimated it was 10 miles long. But within it, as the walls swirled around him, he now saw it appeared only 1 mile long. It took only about 20 seconds to reach what he thought was the other end, and what should be then clear weather. But, and then here's his personal account. When I looked back, I grasped to see the tunnel walls collapse. Or I gasped to see the tunnel walls collapse and form a slit that slowly rotated clockwise. All of our electronic and magnetic navigational instruments were malfunctioning. The compass was slowly spinning even as the airplane flew straight. Instead of the blue sky we expected, everything was a dull, grayish, white haze. Visibility seemed like more than 2 miles, yet we could not see the ocean, the horizon, or the sky. The air was very stable, and there was no lightning or rain. I like to refer to this as an electronic fog because it seemed to be what was interfering with our instruments. We were in the electronic fog for 3 minutes when the controller radioed that he had identified an airplane directly over Miami Beach, flying due west. I looked at my watch and saw that we had been flying for less than 34 minutes. We could not have reached Miami Beach. We should have been approaching the Bimini Islands. And that's the end of his account. Now, we went over this before in Quasar's first book, so this is retouching upon this subject, but this is adding new information as well. At this point, the fog around dissipated in streaks, and there Gernon could see Miami Beach ahead. He realized that given the minimal amount of time that had elapsed in his flight from Andros, something truly phenomenal had happened. Taken by the ramifications, Gernon checked fuel receipts against the amount remaining in his tank, discovering he had not used the amount of fuel he normally would have consumed on such a flight. Checking time estimates, he discovered he had gained 30 minutes. Taken together, it seemed he had been propelled 30 minutes and 100 miles forward into what can only be said was time and space. The storm formation into which the lenticular cloud had morphed could not have extended to Miami Beach, a fact proved by the clear weather when the fog dissipated. It had not been a fog bank. Rather, Gernon believes he conducted the fog as he exited the storm tunnel north of Andros, and somehow it stayed with him until it dissipated over Miami Beach. Possibly because the walls of the tunnel had been swirling around him in vortex motion, some form of field was generated, he has speculated, that allowed for the condition of the fog. It was at this point that he felt zero gravity and a forward thrust. Free of the vortex, the electronic fog must nevertheless have remained. Any electric charge remaining on an aircraft is unexplainable. Aircraft come with leech lines designed to drain off a buildup of static electricity. Yet in Gernon's encounter, the effects can only be explained by a powerful electromagnetic field, one that produced a clutching, visible fog. Bruce Gernon began a lifelong and still continuing search for the answer to the phenomenon he experienced. He believed, whatever it was he encountered, it is crucial to the answer of the many mysteries in the Bermuda Triangle. His observations about the electronic fog not being a fog bank are especially pertinent for other flyers. Quote, I believe the airplane was flying in clear weather, but it appeared to be IMC because the fog was attached to the airplane. In other words, I wasn't flying through the fog. I was flying with the fog. It takes a different perspective of the mind for a pilot to realize this. And this could be the reason for a pilot to become immediately spatially disoriented. End quote. Over the decades since, he has attracted a number of scientists serious to pursue some of the ramifications of his experience. It is not so much the storm cloud that is hard to explain, nor is it the fact that the electric power in it seems to have acted like the catalyst for the vortex tunnel, in a sense forming a horizontal tornado. It is the fact that Gernon and his companions seem to have survived traveling along the inside of a tornado and are therefore first-person eyewitnesses to the potential of the interior of an electromagnetic vortex. Gernon is far from believing he experienced just one of those rare moments when all the elements came together to form a phenomenon of nature. Reports from other pilots who have had experiences in the triangle, plus some of the details contained in the official reports on missing aircraft, suggest others have had encounters with the electronic fog. Some survived, whereas some, misjudging the situation, may have become spatially disoriented and crashed. Such may be the case of Gary Purvis, that's spelled Purvis, on February 1st, 2001, when he was playing tag with a Coast Guard interceptor for drug interception training. Flying in the Keys near Marathon in his Piper Cherokee 6, he was about 10 miles ahead of the Coast Guard aircraft. Weather was excellent, with visibility up to 12 miles. Everything appeared normal, but then suddenly, Purvis radioed the Coast Guard interceptor that he was IMC. Easily translated, quote, instrument meteorological conditions, end quote, means that visibility was gone and he was flying on instruments. So he was just looking at all the gear, all the knobs and everything. He wasn't using what was outside of his windshield. He had not encountered clouds, however, but said a haze had just developed. He then vanished. In this case, some debris was later sighted, indicating Purvis crashed. The NTSB concluded that he was not experienced enough to fly on instruments yet, a rating he had only recently acquired. Gernon has considered this case. Everything suggests the electronic fog. But it obviously was not created by a complex storm cloud. However, Gernon feels electronic fog has other origins. While flying over the Keys in the same general area in 1996, Gernon had his second encounter with the mysterious fog, and this helped him to understand some elements of it. He noted that it conducts around an aircraft as a vortex, forming a donut shape that will constrict close enough to touch the wingtips. This was confirmed by looking straight down. He could see the ocean, and if looking straight up, he could see the sky, confirming the donut or vortex shape to it. He speculated that if over water, it would be wise for a pilot to recall where land was and fly in that direction, as a change in terrain seems to help vanquish the phenomenon. But the most important conclusion he came to is that obviously the electronic fog does not require the power of that strangely building cloud formation or lenticular cloud. It seems to manifest on its own. Although what is causing it remains mysterious, logically we must concede it must play along the lines of a completely invisible energy vortex, and yet have near the power of a visible storm cell. While Gurnon is not the first pilot to encounter the phenomenon, he is the first to analyze it and realize it is not a sudden appearing fog bank, although it gives that illusion from within the aircraft. Reports of the electronic fog are not far more common, most likely, because many pilots who encounter it thought it was a fog bank, or, quite frankly, they vanished. This seems the scenario in the strange disappearance of Peter Jensen in 1980, in which a time and space distortion also is suggested, in that there was no real evidence where Jensen was when he made his mayday. The last radio message also placed him alive and still in the air 6 hours after fuel starvation. Despite only a few cases being publicly reported, Gurnon estimates that about 100 pilots have told him they too have encountered the sudden strange haze and malfunctioning equipment. We're about to get into another account here. Just bear with me. So he said over 100, or about 100 pilots. I would say that's pretty solid evidence for whatever this thing is that it is occurring. All right. On record, the first pilot to report a fog bank that caused electromagnetic havoc with his navigation equipment was no less than Charles Lindbergh. That's Berg with an H. He had taken off from Havana in Spirit of St. Louis, that's the plane name, to head across the Gulf of Mexico. He records what happened in his autobiography of Values from 1976. So this is where it's pulled from. The last flight of my Around the Gulf and Caribbean tour should also have been routine. I took off from Havana Airport about 1:35 in the morning on February 13th, 1928, intending to fly nonstop to St. Louis. It should have been an easy flight, about a third the distance from New York to Paris. My takeoff was quick, my cruising speed high. I felt no need to be miserly with fuel. I climbed to an altitude of 4,000 and settled back to enjoy the night and piloting. But halfway across the Straits of Florida, my magnetic compass started rotating, and the Earth inductor compass needle jumped back and forth erratically. By that time, a haze had formed, screening off the horizon. At first, I thought the Spirit of St. Louis had dropped a wing and was banking, but the turn indicator needle held its center, and a push with my foot on the rudder showed the gyroscope to be working properly. I had only once before seen two compasses malfunction at the same time. That was over the storm I encountered crossing the Atlantic en route to Paris. But then the magnetic compass only oscillated. Although it was through an arc of close to 180 degrees, I could get an approximate idea of direction by taking the midpoint of the card's swing, and I could only hold it by the stars. Over the Straits of Florida, my magnetic compass rotated without stopping, and my Earth inductor was completely useless. I had no notion whether I was flying north, south, east, or west. A few stars directly overhead were dimly visible through haze, but they formed no constellation I could recognize. I started climbing toward the clear sky that had to exist somewhere above. If I could see Polaris, that northern point of light, I could navigate by it with reasonable accuracy. But haze thickened at my altitude as my altitude increased. High, thin clouds crept in to make the stars blink. Surely a storm area lay not far away, very likely above the southern states I had to pass. Should I spiral until daybreak, when I could get a general direction from the sun? That would prevent flying in the wrong direction and possibly finding myself hundreds of miles over the Atlantic or Gulf. Clouds thickened, formed a layer, lowered. I descended to less than 1,000 feet to keep contact with the sea. Even then, I could barely distinguish water from the haze it joined. Turbulence increased. The compass card rotated too erratically to give an indication of direction. Dawn came slowly. Its diffused light seemed to originate in every azimuth, helping my navigation not at all. But while waves below were still half merged with night, a darker shade drew in toward me like a curtain. Land, vague in early twilight, only a narrow strip with more water beyond. And that's the end of that excerpt there. So what are you thinking so far? Let me know in the comments here. Charles Lindbergh had discovered he was over the Bahamas. Quote, "That would mean I had flown at almost a right angle to my proper heading, and it would put me close to 300 miles off course." End quote. A fairly good indication that this was the electronic fog comes from the fact that Lindbergh could see both directly above him and directly below him. Yet when he climbed altitude to break out of what he felt was only a fog bank, he could never make it. The fog, which seemed to have a limit, then seemed limitless as he kept trying to get above it. A possible indication the fog was flying with him and he was not flying through a fog bank. Almost like it imprisoned him, huh? Zenray says the fog is similar to missing 411 cases too. Well, I'll say this about missing 411. I followed David Paulides for quite a bit. It seemed like it was pretty valuable research, and there's probably accuracy in there somewhere. But I've also come across individuals on YouTube who claim that this guy is not being entirely truthful. What we're doing here is reading directly from a research book that somebody spent nearly 2-3 decades putting together, compiling FOIA requests. I guess similar to Paulides, but there's something wrong with the genuinity of some of these cases as far as missing 411 goes. There's a plethora of books. You have to get like a dozen different books just to see the whole scope of the thing. And that's how many I think David Paulides has put out. But we're talking about something a lot different here. This is very specific to just this area. It doesn't happen all over the world. It happens in the Bermuda Triangle. David Paulides was a Bigfoot researcher before he became a missing persons researcher. Now, I do think there's validity to missing people in national parks. The only thing that I could say is similar here between missing 411 and the Bermuda Triangle is that there is time and space displacement. That's all I'll say about that. I did want, like I said, I had been watching David Paulides for a long time, and it's I don't know. I guess there's going to be counter perspectives out there for any of this material, right? But on top of you have this Illuminat vessel that goes and searches the bottom of the ocean around the Bahamas, and it finds a road. It's just sitting there. It's able to crawl along the road. We're talking about some massive concepts here of not only worldwide flooding, but also time and space displacement, and possibly, which we're leaning towards here on this show, the now my thought process just stops. The interdimensional disappearance of individuals, meaning these people are not dying, they are simply going missing from this reality. So there's a lot of different things here going on, and we're just looking at the research. We're looking at the research of others. We're trying to come to a consensus here. I'm able to share my opinion on these things, but it may not always be accurate. But that comes along with all research. But when we're focused and have our full attention on a specific topic, that's where the real work occurs. So, by us going through these books, reading all of these FOIA requested documents, compiled in a very digestible fashion by Gian J. Quasar and Charles Berlitz, that was the first book that we did. It all comes together. It paints quite a picture. And I want this series to give us solid, debatable standpoints. And perhaps undebatable, meaning it's without a doubt been proven that certain things have occurred within the triangle, and people can't say that it didn't occur. Are you going to tell me that all 100 of these pilots that experienced electronic fog are lying? Even if just one of them is telling the truth, there's some validity here. And it's not just some fog storm. This thing's following them. They're inside of this cloud, and they're trying to get out of it, and it's just going with them. Sure sounds like a vortex of time and space to me, especially if they experience anti-gravity. And it only occurs in this location. Doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Now, there's other instances, like we have the Great Lakes Triangle. And we're going to be seeing how similar these accounts are. And I already have 2 episodes of that show available to members. So, members of the channel, not just subscribed, but paying members of the channel, get access to that Great Lakes Triangle series that I started. Eventually, everybody's going to be able to watch that. I'm going to make it free at some point. But it's, there's specific things happening that need looking into. And that's what we're doing here. And as we get further into this, exploring these different concepts, we're going to be looking at other instances of strange phenomenon around the world. But I don't think just one particular thing is happening here. But as far as the electronic fog, this seems like a predatory thing. There's many elements in play here at the same time. It appears from what we've read so far today that just the fact that the plane itself is flying through this area, the instruments on the plane, all the navigational instruments and whatnot, just that being in the general vicinity, it's like this predatory electronic fog cloud detects it like sharks detect blood in the water. And then it comes up and encircles the plane, and no matter how much they try to get out of that, it's just completely around them the whole time. And while they're trying to get out of it and it's moving with them, this thing is also transporting them to a different location. And sometimes it's well past the point from where they were supposed to be landing. Like they're supposed to arrive at a certain destination, and it's actually much later, and they have more fuel than they should have. If that doesn't say displacement, I don't know what else does. Now again, I'm open to conversation here. And thankfully there's been no trolls in the chats here trying to be smarky and ask just things that we've already addressed. So at the same time, while this is like part 34, I'm willing to help onboard new listeners and viewers who are curious about this topic. But don't get snarky here. Like, I take this seriously. I know how to have fun in my life, but this is the serious time. We're doing research. We're getting things squared away. We're trying to get answers to many large questions that for the most part are unanswered. And plus, it's fun to speculate here on what this could be, because of the potential for us as people living here now to understand the past, the present, the future. It's all like, this is philosophical. It's all part of this research. It all goes hand in hand. Zenray says, very possible. They have fog in common as well. His info is accurate. Like you said, I want to know what this fog is. Yeah. Well said, Zenray. See, I'm not going to be on here to bash David Paulides, because he hasn't given me anything to bash him for. There's other researchers that say that he gave inaccurate descriptions in books of certain things, like his life prior to doing the books. I'd have to go back and watch that again, but really, if you're looking to disprove anything, you could find something to do it with. But we're not here to disprove the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. There's other books out there that are written solely to disprove this whole topic, to say, oh no, it's just strange weather occurring. Oh, the pilots are just stupid and they crashed their planes. No, that's not what's happening. People are going missing. Thank God they're not dying. Heavenly Father Creator is in charge of all of this. Think this all happened by chance? Think again. Now, the multi-dimensional aspect here, we covered on Tuesday's show of Coral Castle. 144 overlapping, encapsulated dimensions, all within the footprint of where we live here. So it's not far-fetched to say that these people that are flying into the Bermuda Triangle and go missing, and then their planes found or their boats are found with their pets still aboard, but the people are gone. It's not so far-fetched to say that these people just shifted dimensions. They're still here. They're just in another dimension. And I can't even thoroughly explain what that entails. Like, most of us can't wrap our heads around 144 overlapping within a same footprint dimensions. It's just, for some people, it's too much. But we're trying to understand all of this here, instead of just dismissing it and saying, oh, that's spooky. What about that? Ah. Like, we're not doing any of that. We're trying to figure out what this electronic fog is. And what I was saying earlier is that this seems predatory in nature, which means it's intelligent fog. And that there's lights that occur inside this fog and it's not lightning. Okay. The mystery deepens, but we're looking for an explanation here. And the explanation is most likely in the details of some of these stories. The fact that there's these USOs that come up like they're curious, they go up to the boat, and then the people on the boat take the oars and hit the thing with their oars, and then it goes back down under the water, but doesn't run away. It stays over by the anchor. And then once they reel the anchor in, that thing starts to light up again, like got disturbed, like, oh no, like they're moving, what's going on? Like, there's intelligent design happening here. And if you were to look into USOs and all that entails, there's accounts from the military, from pilots, saying that there's another civilization living in the ocean, under the crust. Like, that's really getting into some deep topics here. A civilization that wants nothing to do with us above ground. And is that far-fetched? I mean, once you see all these underground tunnels that have been built across the world, plus the multi-level bases that have been built by our military. You're going to tell me that's all fiction? There's a reason the Denver airport looks the way that it does. All right. But yeah, Zenray, that's what we're here to do. We're here to find out what this electronic fog is. All right. So let's get back to reading. I just wanted to square that away because while I do read verbatim from these books for long periods of time, I do also like to share my opinion on things while we're reading, and this is one of those times. I'll say one more thing before we get back to reading. There are some cases that David Paulides have covered that involve people walking into nightclubs in cities where there's copious amounts of cameras and security surveillance footage at all the entrances and exits where a person walked in and never left. Or in other cases, they left, turned around the corner on the street, like on the sidewalk, turned around the corner, never saw again. Almost like our eyewitness to this, like the slit experiment, putting particles through two different slits, and whether it's observed or not, like it reacts differently. Not observed, it goes all over the place, creates a scatter pattern. But when it's observed going through the two slits, it goes in a uniform trajectory. So even down to particle level, there's intelligent design at play here. How can particles be aware that they're being watched? And how can electronic fog be aware of a plane approaching, and then it engulfs it and holds on to it like it caught a fish? It's wild stuff. But there's more here in this chapter, so let's get back to reading here. Volcanoes and igneous flows are places over which compasses will constantly deflect or spin. In the triangle, however, this phenomenon comes and goes and is not limited to specific locations, indicating it is not caused by some wreck or anything static below the surface. Quote, dead spots, end quote, are known in the area and remain fairly constant, though unexplained. These locations earned their ominous name due to the fact that radio communication is non-existent during transit through these places. Officially, they are not chartered, though old hands in the area pretty much know the main locations. Advised of one of these spots by a jet pilot at the Navy Flying Club, Carrie Trantham, last name spelled Trantham, took it in stride. He had cautioned, she recalled, that there was no need to panic if she lost radio communication because it would only be for a brief time. For her proposed course, he had said one was south of Everglades City near the Bay of Florida, a location that was far from eerie to her. Quote, everyone should see the Florida Keys from an altitude of 500 feet. The water is so clear below that you could see sharks, stingrays, dolphins, turtles, and other abundance of other sea life. And an abundance of other sea life. The different hues of blue are awe-inspiring. Turquoise water, mangrove islands, sand flats, and seagrass meadows intertwine in a swirling display of color. End quote. She took off from Ormond Beach and headed south on her return trip to Key West, beginning what she did not realize would be her most harrowing trip in the Bermuda Triangle. Over southern Florida, she encountered unusual turbulence, and it took all her strength to control the stick. A front was moving in behind her. Believing she was experiencing the front's advancing wind shear, she reported it to Miami, which the operator acknowledged only as a matter of form. But basically, they're saying the operator took her word for it. By dusk, the wind shear had long passed. She was now coming to the coastline of the Bay of Florida. Her radio and all equipment had been working fine through the wind shear because she had reached Miami instantly. When she approached the triangle, things changed. And she has her personal account here in an excerpt. I was now ahead of the front, but there was high cloud cover, which obscured the moon and the stars. Passing Naples, I glanced out of the cockpit to the east, and, to my amazement, I could see the lights of Miami on the horizon. It was a beautiful sight that made me catch my breath. I felt alone in the cockpit and adjusted the interior lights. Flying over the Everglades, a surface haze began to develop. Land and water began to merge. Gradually, as the sun set, the lights on the instrument panel intensified, and an eerie feeling began to creep through me. Then it happened. Suddenly, it was as if someone threw a blanket over the airplane. The horizon was gone. Panic set in. I wasn't sure if I was right side up or upside down. Death was looking me in the face, and I said to myself, "Carrie, get control of this airplane or you will end up in the Gulf and they will never find you." And that's the end of that excerpt. In a, quote, situation like this, end quote, she admitted many thoughts went through her head, from silly and inconsequential ones like, quote, "Will my house be clean when they come to clear out my personal belongings?" End quote. To more serious ones like considering this was the mysterious, quote, dead space, end quote, she had been told about, to finally what comes to most every pilot's mind in the area. Quote, "Is this the Bermuda Triangle?" End quote. This question especially seemed pertinent when she looked at her dash panel. And here's more of an excerpt of her experience. "When I looked at the instruments, nothing seemed to make sense. The compass was erratic. The illumination in the cockpit began to fluctuate from dim to bright and back again. The altitude indicator began to roll, and there was a high-pitched buzzing in my headset. I finally got the airplane level and glanced at the altimeter, but I had no idea what the altitude was. I tried to keep my wings level, but I was so shaky that I was over... Let me reread that. I tried to keep my wings level, but I was so shaky that I was over-controlling the airplane. I couldn't tell if I was over land or water. It was totally black outside the cockpit. No city lights, no horizon, nothing. And that's the end of the excerpt. Now near panic, Carrie Trantham discovered another problem. She had no radio communication. She had no idea if Miami's lack of response was because she was in that odd area of dead airspace or if there was some other problem. But she finally got another channel punched in and then raised Miami and what she felt was an indifferent operator. Quote, he said that he had just turned me over to another frequency and couldn't talk to me. My response was, yes, but I am up here all by myself and I don't know where I am. He suggested that I climb to a higher altitude. This should have put me over the edge. I was in a total state of shock, trying to fly an airplane that seemed to have a mind of its own and nobody would talk to me. End quote. Eventually, things returned to normal and Carrie discovered herself near Marathon in the Florida Keys, far off course. From there, she followed the Intercoastal Highway and finally identified Key West below. She admits that she had to pry her fingers off the stick after she had landed. She later wrote of her account for an article in the AOPA and ended up musing at how they changed her title from, quote, Surviving the Bermuda Triangle, end quote, to, quote, Surviving Get Home-itis, end quote. This isn't the first time pilots have been edited from making any reference to the Bermuda Triangle, but it is a reflection of how the topic is not discussed in some aviation quarters, except with levity or ridicule. As one might imagine, weekend winging is an expensive hobby, and there are many people who are afraid of any side effects on their lucrative business or political positions. Considering this factor caused one ambassador to shy away from coming public about his encounter with electronic fog, though he confided it to Bruce Gernon. One exception, and a very notable exception, was the boisterous Martin Caidin, spelled Caidin, test pilot, author, and screenwriter. He went so far as to publish the account in his Ghosts of the Air from 1986. So I'm going to take a note of this name. This concerned his flight of a restored vintage PBY Catalina from Bermuda to Jacksonville, Florida, through the Triangle. On board were his wife, Dee Dee, Connie Edwards, and a few other aviation luminaries. The day was bright and the visibility was limited. Or the visibility was unlimited. Suddenly, however, they couldn't see the noise of their airplane. Suddenly, however, they couldn't see the nose of their airplane because a fog quickly formed. Looking out along the wings, they saw the wingtips disappear into a bottle of, quote, eggnog, end quote. Caidin's description of the fog because it was slightly yellowish. Then they were directed to their instruments. And here's an excerpt of that experience. The magnetic compass began to rotate. It picked up speed and went whirling around as if it were a whirligig. We checked the photo printout from the weather satellite. The Metsat picture showed us in absolutely clear air. The nearest clouds were 200 miles south of us. Just about that time, the Metsat print machine died. The electronic innards of the Catalina, all 2 million clams worth, shriveled up inside. The LORAN went out. The electronic fuel gauges sagged to fuzzy markings. The long-numbered navigation gear, which was digital, read 8888888888. The radios died. Everything still had power, but nothing worked. That's the end of that excerpt. Hey, Andreas, good to see you here. Changing altitudes made no difference. It was impossible to get on top of it. This, quote, electronic eggnog, end quote, lasted for 4 hours. Then, about an hour out of Jacksonville, the eggnog fog suddenly dissipated. Quote, we could see forever and ever. The mag compass settled down. The directional gyro quit its foolishness and steadied. The electronics emerged from their funk, and everything worked perfectly. End quote. Due to the LORAN resetting and then freezing, Caden felt they were completely engulfed in whatever it was that had formed around them. However, Carrie Trantham felt that GPS was not affected, forming the theory that the phenomenon is dependent on something below the sea, perhaps because she felt she was near the mysterious, quote, dead space, end quote, of which she had been forewarned. Varying intensities of electromagnetic effects may be directly proportional to the strength of the electronic fog. In some instances, pilots can communicate over the radio for a while. In others, there is no donut shape to the vortex of fog, and in parentheses, or the pilot may be so stunned they are unaware they can look straight down or straight up, end parentheses. What the combined experiences amount to is that no one can explain what causes the electronic fog, let alone its vagaries. They do agree, albeit for some reluctantly, that it exists and so far defies our own attempts to disperse electric static charges in aircraft. Since there are degrees to everything, the occurrence of unexplained moments of spinning compasses, tumbling gyros, and erratic electronic panel readouts in clear weather may indicate that the conditions were beginning to form, but nevertheless did not come to full fruition to form the fog around the aircraft or boat before the effects then passed away. For the most intense and potentially alarming effects of time and space displacement, those experienced in Bruce Gernon's flight, a fast-forming storm cell was required. Spontaneous manifestations of electronic fog in clear weather, however, present only a fraction of the power. Bruce Gernon's encounter does, in fact, seem one of those rare moments in which all the elements came together to create phenomenal effects, and yet still the ability to survive them. Naturally, this raises the question as to just how serious is electronic fog. That is, how relevant is it to explain the many missing ships and planes in the Bermuda Triangle? Its generation without the storm cloud seems capable of causing spatial disorientation in pilots unaware or in denial of its existence. But still, debris was located in the Purvis case in 2001. From the confusing radio messages of Charles Dixon in 1960 and Carolyn Coscio in 1969, and that last name is spelled Coscio, who apparently could not see clearly below her despite being near safety, the electronic fog could have been a crucial factor. Dixon's compass was thought to be non-operational, though he had two compasses and one of them was independent of the electronic gear. Both aircraft may have vanished as a result of getting lost because of the electronic fog, rather than something as dynamic as implied in Gurnon's encounter, and devolving into time and space. Both occurred in deep and open waters near the Caicos Islands, where many others have vanished, though without sending any mayday first, perhaps because they were unable. Since the exact location of both aircraft could not be determined, the sea may merely have had time to disperse and hide any traces of their respective crashes. Mike Roxby's death on December 16, 1974, on Great Inagua, an island near the Caicos, may be a deadly example of the potential of electronic fog. He was flying from Miami with two others, Don Paris and Kelly Hansen, in his Cessna 177 N2128Q. Both survived to tell what happened. While passing over Bimini, instrument malfunction began. The radio ceased to operate. The gauges were erratic. At times, the radio and equipment returned, allowing Roxby to reorient himself and continue the flight. When they reached Great Inagua, they thought they were finally safe. Now at 6:45 p.m., they were coming in for a landing. Hansen recalls, quote, "1 second everything was clear and we could see the airstrip perfectly. Then, suddenly, we were in the middle of a swirling cloud that came from nowhere," end quote. As a result, Roxby crashed and was killed. There's a murderous fog here. It is predatory in nature, after all these accounts here. Hansen and Don Paris not only walked away, but Paris walked away a believer in the triangle. Quote, "You have heard about the Devil's Triangle. You see movies about it. But you can't believe it, really. Well, I believe it now." End quote. A similar encounter could be posited for one or both of the KC-135 Stratotankers. If one or both had conducted the electronic fog, this may explain why they seemed to collide in midair or suddenly explode. And one is tempted to wonder what caused the C-133 and Sting-27 to vanish after their electronic SIFs faded from the radar scope. Although far rarer, ships have also encountered the electronic fog. One case is that of the tug Good News in 1966. It is famous largely because her boisterous captain, Don Henry, didn't shy away from talking about it. Don Henry was a big man, hard hat, diver, salver, and he looked like he could come out the winner in a fight with a great white shark. His account was also matter of fact, and the event was witnessed by his crew. They were along the tongue of the ocean en route from Puerto Rico to Miami with a barge on a 600-foot tow line. The tug was 160 feet overall, with 2,000 horsepower, and the barge was about 2,500 tons. It had carried petroleum nitrate, but it was empty now. It was while he was below in his cabin that it happened. The chief officer called down and asked Henry to come look at the compass. Due to the alarm in his voice and the men hollering about the bridge, Henry admits he burst through the doors and yelled, quote, "What the hell is going on here?" End quote. So, we read this account before in the previous book, but we're covering it again a second time here. The first mate pointed to the compass, and then here's an excerpt of the experience. I walked over and looked. The gyro was tumbling, and the magnetic compass was going completely bananas. It was simply going around and around. I had never seen anything like that before. We had no communications of any kind over the radios. There were no lights. We lost the generators. They were running, but produced no energy. There was just some kind of electronic drain at this time. There was just nothing. A case of 50 batteries I had picked up in San Juan had to be thrown away. They were completely shot. This we found out later. We didn't know this at the time. That's the end of the excerpt. Instinctively, Henry rushed back to the stern to check on the barge. But, quote, the sky caught my attention first. There was no horizon now. You couldn't see where the sky ended and the water began. I looked down on the ocean. All I saw was foam. It was like milk. The sky was the same color. There was just no definition between the two, as there always is. So that's why I say there was no horizon. End quote. When Henry looked back to the barge, he was shocked to see it was not there. Quote, the tow line was leading back the way it was supposed to be, but there was simply no barge. Pulling on the line revealed it was still taut. The barge still seemed to be attached, but it was completely lost to sight. There was a fog or something around it, like clouds, and the tow line was running aft into that. It's hard to explain. I've likened it to the old Indian rope trick. The tow line was just sticking out of a fog, but the fog was nowhere else. It was just around where the barge should be. The water was also more choppy immediately around where the barge should be. End quote. Don Henry admitted that he had seen enough, or that he had had enough. He plowed into the barge and kicked the throttles forward. However, there was simply no response. He felt like the good news was in a tug-of-war with something holding them back. This frightening incident lasted between 7 to 10 minutes, and then suddenly, as it had arrived, it dissipated. Not like a fog bank that fades away behind one, but it just parted and was completely gone. Quote, we could see the horizon again. We got everything back. The radios, the lights, the gyros, the generators. We got the damn barge back. The line was leading back to it. That fog was gone. End quote. After some distance, when the feeling of safety returned, he stopped the good news and took a boat back to the barge to make sure it was all right. Henry considered it much warmer than it should have been. Quote, it wasn't hot. You could touch it, but it was much warmer than would have been normal. End quote. A former agnostic about the Bermuda Triangle, An incident finally made a believer out of him. Or the incident finally made a believer out of him. What is partially interesting about Don Henry's encounter is the twofold nature of the electronic fog. It seemed, at least to those on the good news, that it was all around them, but from their vantage, a cloud had seized the tug. This may be the case, but it may have been that Henry's tug would have looked the same to someone outside of the haze around them. From his perspective, however, it seemed they were in a milky white bottle, pulling a tug obscured by a cloud. This observation bears a striking similarity to that which Bruce Gernon encountered. He believed he picked up the electronic fog upon exiting the swirling cloud tunnel. In the Good News' encounter, they seemed to be in the electronic fog which surrounded the more powerful cloud over the barge. In other words, the electronic fog existed outside of the cloud, which could therefore have been the intense epicenter of the phenomenon. One wonders if more heat had been generated by the cloud, what effects would have been? If such a fog condensed around a yacht, or even a large tug like Henry's, could an explosion result that would effectively make the ship or yacht look like it had vanished? It really comes back to the source of electronic fog as to whether it can play a much more dynamic factor in aircraft and ship disappearances than briefly causing alarm in seamen or panic and sometimes vertigo in pilots. In no case but Bruce Gernon's has electronic fog caused such alarming effects. The disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle, of course, could represent those pilots who did not safely skirt what seems to be a window in time and space, but may have been propelled far beyond the meter 100 miles that Gernon and his companions experienced. Arguments over a source for electronic fog other than a strong, electrically charged storm cloud must accept that in Gernon's case, at least its formation was the result of an obvious electromagnetic vortex formed as the cloud closed in. Short of such a storm cloud, there must be some other genesis for electronic fog, still unknown. And in each case, it seems safe to presume it is electromagnetic in origin, and the aircraft or ship may be necessary for its materialization. Further developing the theory of electronic fog in the next chapter, we will see where ships have been in proximity to fogs that registered on their radar scopes, while at the same time experiencing a wide and disturbing array of electronic effects. In effect, the circumstances are identical to those that befell the Good News, a cloud on the surface of the sea forming an intense epicenter with outlying electromagnetic effects. Only in these cases, the ships weren't near the epicenter of it, but skirting the periphery. Still, the origins for spinning compasses and sudden radio blackouts are elusive in other cases, though no less alarming. British film producer and director Simon Ludgate was filming a documentary on the Bermuda Triangle for National Geographic in 2004 called the Named Science series, a principal part of which was to retrace Flight 19's flight path before they got lost, of course, in the Bahamas. For this flight, he had secured an immaculately restored TBM Avenger similar to the planes of Flight 19. Sparing no part of his budget, he had asked the Danish Meteorological Office to analyze, quote, their satellite data on electromagnetic anomalies around the Earth, end quote, and made no secret of the fact to them that they were, quote, investigating what scientific basis or otherwise there might be for the high incidence of disappearances in one of the most patrolled, busy, and tracked areas of sea in the world, end quote. They began running their tests. Meanwhile, and here's an entire excerpt. This goes on for over a page. And before we start this, I think this is a perfect time to show the image from the book. So let me get that going here. Hey, John, good to see you here. So this is straight from the page of this book here, from the next few pages. But it says the charted areas of magnetic anomalies based on the readouts given Simon Ludgate by the Danish Meteorological Office. The triangle in the Pacific is on the exact opposite side of the Earth as the triangle in the Atlantic/Caribbean. Similar to what Bruce Cathy was saying in the Coral Castle series that we do on Tuesdays. With one opposite side reaction from whatever happens on the other side. It corresponds with the area known as the Devil's Sea, a section of sea known for mysterious disappearances and often considered the Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific. And I do believe we will cover that in the future. I may do a completely separate series just on that alone, because I want to focus on all these individually. But let's read this excerpt here. They began running their tests. Meanwhile, and here's the excerpt. We set off from Fort Lauderdale Airport in Florida in a beautifully reconditioned Avenger bomber, flown by a contemporary of the pilots who disappeared in the legendary Flight 19 squadron. We took off at the same time, 2:10 p.m., and set the same course to Chicken Island and Grand Bahama Island as Flight 19. I was being filmed by a chase plane, and we had 5 cameras running on the Avenger. It was a beautiful day. Better weather than Flight 19 had. And middle of the summer. We used old school compasses and a stopwatch to navigate with a modern GPS standing by, just in case. Almost immediately, I was struck by 2 things. The ocean and the sky are so similar in color in that area that you could quite easily invert, especially in a cloudless sky like that day, and not realize it as the horizon had almost disappeared. There was hardly any difference in the sky and the sea. It was like flying inside a goldfish bowl. The second thing was how similar all the little formations of islands looked. We could have been anywhere in a 200-mile radius. We flew on for 2 hours, and then something very odd happened. Our turn and slip indicators in both planes froze at exactly the same time. These are simple little devices like a carpenter's spirit level, which tell you whether or not you are skidding sideways on a turn. Even stranger, both our compasses started to behave weirdly. They were spinning and wavering as if magnetic north was moving round and round. I spoke to both pilots and suggested we fly on for a while, estimate our position, then switch on the GPS and see if our satellite position was the same as our calculation. The next 20 minutes were really unsettling. You can see me checking the time on my dive watch at the moment the problem first starts. Then we played a dramatic reconstruction of what was heard by air traffic control from the leader of Flight 19 at the exact same moment, 2 hours into the flight as us. They reported their compasses looked wrong and the sky looked all funny. That was the last thing ever heard from them. They already knew this, as my producer James Buchanan and I had been studying the transcripts as the basis for our reconstruction. Do you know, the next 20 minutes were very uncomfortable. What if the GPS didn't work? What if we found ourselves 200 miles from our calculated position, like another contributor to the program had experienced in his Cessna between Grand Bahama and Fort Lauderdale? 20 minutes passed, and we fired up the GPS. We were 80 miles away from where the pilot thought we were. I think we experienced exactly the same anomaly as Flight 19. Despite the hot summer sun beating through the plexiglass cockpit, I felt a chill run through me where I sat in the navigator's seat behind the pilot. The sting in the tail was as we flew back towards Fort Lauderdale after a 5-hour flight, low on fuel. I looked up directly above me for some reason. We were at about 5,000 feet, and way up in the blue of the sky above me were 5 silver objects. I thought at first they were military jets practicing dogfights or an array of weather balloons. But these objects, which looked shiny and spherical, were darting around in big circles like the rings of the Olympic logo. They were so high I could only just make them out. And they were not leaving contrails like a jet. Contrails. At that height, they would almost certainly have been if they were jets. I estimated their speed, assuming my guess at their height was also roughly correct at 50,000 feet, was between 1,000 and 5,000 miles per hour. When we landed, we were all wrung out from the heat, stress, and complexity of what had just happened. And the Danish Meteorological Office satellite data analysis? They handed me a piece of paper when I got back to London with a printout of a map of the world. There was a blue triangular shape over the area stretching between Bermuda, Miami, and Costa Rica, as well as a similar shape over the South China Sea, which is what we're seeing right here. The chief officer who gave me the printout said the blue area represented a drop of 6% in the electromagnetic field in both areas. Not gravity, EMF. He couldn't explain it, but said that sort of anomaly was unprecedented. 0.6% would be more what he'd expect. So a 0.6% drop is normal, but this was 10 times that of a drop. He went on to say that sort of inequality between two regions would act like two levels of water finding the same level, which would store millions of amperes of electricity in the upper atmosphere. And as Nikola Tesla and laterally the much-aligned John Hutchison in Vancouver discovered, Tesla coil-type fields can change the molecular structure of metal and make it granular and brittle. It can also spin a compass like a Ferris wheel. You can't beat a bit of good science to bring a little clarity to a crazy story. Question: how big would you estimate the objects to have been? Simon answers, hard to say, as it was hard to judge the distance. I really couldn't say accurately, but maybe 20 feet wide apiece. Next question: when did the compass begin to spin, and when did it finally return to normal? Simon answers, after we passed over Grand Bahama, and it returned to normal after we turned back over Grand Bahama, so it was for about an hour. And that's the end of the excerpt. While independently arrived at, Simon Ludgate's magnetic field discoveries nevertheless complement some old and esoteric theories of other researchers, and yet at the same time provide a far more rational basis off which to theorize. For instance, the late Dr. J. Manson Valentine believed that strong magnetic fields could open up doors to other dimensions. There we go. However, without any catalyst for the creation of anomalies, he opted to propose that the areas of magnetic anomalies encountered in the triangle had been created in the wake of UFOs, which his studies had indicated visited the Bermuda Triangle more than any other place on Earth. Somehow, the UFOs could create these anomalies through their own, still unfathomable to us, type of propulsion, in order to come and go from other places on this planet or into outer space and even into and out of other dimensions. In doing so, they ionized pockets of air, and these were the locations in which planes and ships conducted the electronic fog. Or they created intense magnetic fields through which the craft slipped into other dimensions. As Simon's flight experiences convey these two phenomena, UFOs and electromagnetic anomalies are the most frequently encountered enigmas in the triangle. While the verified existence of an overall magnetic field fluctuation in the triangle does not bolster Dr. Valentine's personal theory regarding UFOs, modern magnetic field readouts, such as those provided to Sam Ludgate, outline for us an entire area that is anomalous. In and of itself, the overall anomaly does not affect travel. We should, however, appreciate that it may turn the area into the medium in which more intense and localized electromagnetic phenomena can be created, or it may even play a role in intensifying periods of electromagnetic anomalies from other sources. Among the scientific tests done in the region for other reasons, some have provided tantalizing clues pointing to the existence of local magnetic anomalies. Hey, Missing Time, I see you there. Missing Time showed up at a very appropriate time. The most provocative are readouts indicating the triangle is prone to natural magnetic vortices. In essence, they were vertical but invisible tunnels, similar to the horizontal tunnel Bruce Gernon had experienced in the power of the electric storm cloud. We must recall that it was within that vortex tunnel that Gernon had conducted the electronic fog. Valentine and Gernon are not alone in positing that there must be more than one source for the generation of electronic fog, and perhaps for even more astounding effects than experienced by Gernon. In their theory's favor are the repeated encounters by pilots and shipmasters of electronic fog on clear days. Valentine believed that these could indicate the locations used by UFOs to materialize in our planet or dimension, while Gernon is more conservative, believing that if invisible vortices have the same or more power than the tunnel he experienced, they may be a door to time-space. Esoteric theories notwithstanding, the purpose of Project Magnet and a study of its results reveal the disquieting potential of what can only be called unexplained vortices and their significance to the phenomenon of the Bermuda Triangle. And with that concludes Chapter 6. So next week's chapter is Chapter 7, Vortices, Space-Time Continua, and Electromagnetic Anomalies. This is some of the most exciting portions of this series for me personally. And for next week's show, we will have 6 different photographs and I believe 2 different maps. So we'll have 8 images that will be scanned, or not scanned in. I was going to scan them in, but I took photographs of the maps and everything. So going forward, anything that is an image in the book, it'll be displayed on the side here. Because it's a little bit bigger of a frame, and like you're able to see that a lot larger than in here. Like, let me just show a comparison. Like, you're able to see all that much clearer with me having a photograph taken of it. Plus, we don't spend time trying to get the focus the right way. So I'm glad that we're following this protocol going forward. So, what are your thoughts here? Is this electronic fog intelligent? It sure seems like that to me. And also, it's predatory, it seems. And unfortunately, some people have succumbed to this fog. So, if it wasn't the intention of the fog to kill these people, it's sure doing a good job trying to get them to crash. They're trying to go against our free will of travel. In one of the accounts we read today, the female pilot had to use all her strength to even move the gears. So it's like if they wanted to make sure these people are safe, they wouldn't be doing this. And I say they because it seems like this is intelligent, whatever's occurring here. Like I said earlier, like blood in the water. Oh yeah, and also the 5 silver like spheres or orbs, and then also the discs that are sitting in the water. Zenray says, I think it's attached to the silver disc in some technology that they have. It's very likely. Almost like a puppet master. The fog is underneath, and then you have these objects that are shiny, silvery. Some of them are spheres, orbs, others are discs. But they always seem to be present around these phenomenon. So if it's a case of abduction, we know how on-land abductions go. They just snatch you up. So I wonder if being on a vessel such as a boat or a plane inhibits them from simply snatching you up because you're surrounded by this metal enclosure. And the only way for them to get you is to pull you into this like nuts that is the electronic cloud. But also, what we were talking about in this chapter today is that it seems there's some magnetic vortice or tunnel that's invisible, that's like a horizontal tornado, which sucks these planes and ships into it, especially the planes. And from going through this horizontal magnetic tornado, there's a fog that starts to build up kind of like snow. It's really bizarre. I'm trying to think of something else to compare it to. It's like, keep in mind we're talking about a concept that we have not proved. We're just giving accounts of what others experience through. And I'm speculating here on what this could be. But if the fog is building up around the wings, I want a little more clarity on if, like... Because they were talking earlier, it was like hugging, like a 200-mile radius, and then it just went and pulled them in. And then you could see below and above, but if they tried to fly above, this cloud just moved with them. Like a container. So there's a lot going on here. Give me one moment, because I do want to grab a few other pieces of literature I have. So just give me a second. Okay. So I just want to give all of you a preview of what we're going to be covering after the Bermuda Triangle II book. This is also by Gian J. Quasar. This book's called They Flew into Oblivion, The Disappearance of Flight 19. So this book covers just that whole case in its entirety. It's over 240 pages here. It's 248 pages to be exact. This, I believe, will be the next book in this series that we'll cover. We also have, by the same author, A Passage into Oblivion, The Last Voyage of the USS Cyclops. So, 5 planes that went missing, 1 ship that went missing. Same author. He's done his research here. That's why we're keeping on looking at all of this work. This is 279 pages. Next, also by Gian J. Quasar, Then Came the Dawn, The Search for Amelia Earhart, Then and Now. This book covers everything about the disappearance of Amelia Earhart. We're going to be learning a lot here in this series. This one's 247 pages. So we got all this still to go through. We also have this to take a look at. Not sure if that's going to fit in with this show, but it can. This show or Coral Castle. And then we also have Magnetohydrodynamics, which is a discarded library book. And this was printed in 1957. Oh, and this actually, I thumbed to a page, and randomly we have something that's similar to what we just covered today. It says Figure 3 ripples in a plasma cylinder causing instability. This would be a good visualization of what that magnetic horizontal tornado would look like, right? At least visually, this is what I see. And then the planes flying through the center. And in doing so, they pick up the electronic fog. There's like different electronic fogs that they're talking about in this chapter that we just covered today. So if you think about it, we got like all this left still to do. Plus a whole other slew of books I have on lost ships. Stuff covering the Great Lakes Triangle, which I'm going to try to keep that in its own series. But we're getting close to the end of the book we're currently on. So we got about, I'd say, a third left. I was going to say a quarter. It's more like a third left. So far we read 170 pages, and it is a total of 271. So really, we only got 100 pages to go with this. Zenray says, I'm not sure we can understand it. Fog is water drops, and then there's an electromagnetic energy. And then somehow it moves around and acts intelligent. I'm not sure we've been handed the concept. Hey Juan, good to see you here. I'm glad you guys are dropping in. I'm doing my best to get this out to everyone. You try to give me an answer as to why the lives aren't as populated as they should be. I'm doing everything by the book, technically. I'm setting up live streams. I'm putting the tags in. I maxed out the tags. It has 500 characters max. I have it up like 498 out of 500. Every type of thing you could imagine. Like I'm putting time-space vortices, Bermuda Triangle, anti-gravity. Like all this stuff should be fine. It doesn't, like we're not doing anything wrong here. We're simply doing research. And we're on Rumble right now live as well. So anybody watching over on Rumble, thank you. I appreciate that. At some point, I'll try to incorporate the live chat into the video here. But I just don't find it necessary right now to do that. I have been noticing that live chats do not show up after the live ends. So I'm going to have to see what's going on with that too. Because I was under the assumption that the live chats would remain on the live videos. So it's kind of weird. But other than that, we've been doing this pretty steadily for about a year now. Actually, I think it's a little over a year. This month was, or is, the 1 year anniversary of me doing these shows. So we did 34 shows so far. And we're going to have probably just as many if we go through all those books. So we still have quite a bit to go. But that's why we're here. Like, this research is ongoing. And we can't just put a lid on it and say, oh, well, we can't just speculate this is what it is, and then we're just going to move on to something else. We're going to look under every rock. We're going to look inside every crevice. We're going to see everything we could possibly find out about any of the instances regarding the Bermuda Triangle. We're going to look at all this stuff, especially the Devil's Sea, which is located near Japan. in the, what did they say, near the China Sea there? It's up on the, in the picture here, next, like the closest to the left side here. And that's apparently a mirror opposite location of the Bermuda Triangle. And if you've watched my Coral Castle series, we did talk about fairly early on in the series that, Bruce Cathy had noticed that when a nuclear detonation went off, that on the other opposite side of the planet, there was a reaction. And it seems like something similar is happening here, where we have two nearly identical shapes of triangles, and they're at opposite ends of each other. So I don't care how or where you sit on what this planet is, but there's the yin and yang to all of this. As above, so below, as we've been covering in the Coral Castle series. Everything has an equal opposite reaction to any actions that we take or things that happen or we experience. Zenray says that fog is on our radar. Yeah. We're looking into this more. I'm glad that the next chapter we're covering is going to further elaborate on that. But I would like to have like a visual representation of what we're talking about with the fog. If I have to draw something up, I'll do it. But in the meantime, we're just going to continue digging into this material and make sure that we're seeing everything we possibly can before we come to a solid conclusion. And even then, like I said, we're not here for complete conclusions. We're here for the research and learning what's already here, what we could use to study this in the present, and what this could possibly mean for the future. But with that, I'm going to call this for this show. This is the end for now. We'll be back next Thursday. Keep an eye out for my Sunday show, and make sure to leave a like below. We also have our Tuesday show, Coral Castle Deep Dives, and we'll be here at the same time again. And that's that. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Zenray, Juan, Andreas, John, Missing Time. I think that's everybody who commented, and those that are silently watching. I know there's a few of you. It's all good. I hope you take something away from this, being a fly on the wall or being active in the chat. So I appreciate y'all being here. Until the next one, class dismissed.